Africa, a complex and rich continent of cultures and religions. How did it get in its current form? Well, let's delve into the past and unravel the tapestry of history. It's the late 19th century, and Africa, a continent rich with diverse cultures, languages and societies, is on the brink of an unwanted seismic shift. This was a time when Africa was not just a continent, but a mosaic of independent kingdoms, tribes and chieftaincies, each with its own unique identity and way of life. Enter the European powers of the day: Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal and Italy. They cast their eyes on Africa, not to appreciate its rich tapestry, but to unravel it thread by thread. Their aim? To carve up this vast continent into neat little parcels, each to be claimed by a European power. The tool to achieve this grand design was the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference, convened in November 1884, was an assembly of European powers with a singular focus: to establish the rules of the game for the colonization of Africa. Picture a grand hall in Berlin filled with diplomats and statesmen from all over Europe. Not a single African leader was present. Not a single African voice was heard. This was a conference about Africa, but without Africa. The attendees of this conference, the great powers of Europe, were not there to engage in academic debates. They gathered with a clear purpose: to divide Africa among themselves, like a pie at a feast. Each slice, each boundary drawn on the map, was determined not by the realities on the ground in Africa, but by the desires and ambitions of European powers. The stage was set for a radical reshaping of Africa, a reshaping that would have profound and lasting impacts. So with the stage set, let's turn the pages back to November 1884, to the Berlin Conference. With the ink barely dry on the maps, the impacts of this monumental decision were soon felt across Africa. The result of the Berlin Conference was a continent carved up like a sumptuous banquet, ready for exploitation by the European powers. The aftermath was immediate and acute. The partitioning of Africa led to an unbridled exploitation of its resources. Africa, rich in rubber, diamonds, gold and ivory, became a veritable treasure trove for the European powers. But this was not a treasure hunt with the spirit of adventure and discovery. It was a systematic, brutal extraction of wealth that left the continent and its people impoverished. And then there was the forced assimilation. Indigenous African societies and cultures were not spared in the European colonizers' quest for dominance. European norms were imposed, often brutally, on African societies. The rich tapestry of African cultures was forcefully woven into the drab uniformity of European norms. The vibrant diversity of African languages, religions and customs was suppressed, and European languages, Christianity and Western norms were imposed. A cultural genocide, one might say. But Africans were not mere bystanders in this historical narrative. They were active participants who resisted this brutal onslaught. Resistance movements sprang up across Africa. Brave men and women fought against colonial rule, risking life and limb for the freedom of their land and resources. These movements, these conflicts, were the birth pangs of a continent struggling to assert its identity, its right to self-determination, in the face of colonial oppression. The echoes of the Berlin Conference reverberated across Africa, sparking a wave of resistance and conflict. The aftermath of the Berlin Conference was not just a story of exploitation and assimilation. It was also a story of resistance, of a continent's struggle for identity and freedom. It was the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards self-determination and independence. And that journey continues today. As the dust settled, the legacy of the Berlin Conference was etched deep into the fabric of Africa. The scars of this gathering of European powers, held in a far-off German city, are visible even today, over a century later. It's like a story written not in ink, but in the blood, sweat and tears of the African people. The conference, which had not a single African at the table, carved up a continent, creating borders that paid no heed to the ethnic, tribal and cultural connections that had existed for generations. These arbitrary boundaries, drawn by foreign hands, with little understanding of the land they were dividing, have reverberated through the ages, shaping the political landscape of modern Africa. Imagine, if you will, a patchwork quilt, each piece stitched together without consideration of colour, pattern or texture. The result is a hodgepodge, a chaotic tapestry of mismatched pieces. This is the political map of Africa, a continent cut into pieces by a conference held in Berlin. The economic repercussions of the conference were equally profound. Africa, rich in resources, was viewed as a treasure trove to be plundered by the European powers. Gold, diamonds, rubber, ivory, the continent was stripped bare, its wealth funneled across the seas to enrich foreign lands. This exploitation of resources left deep economic scars that Africa is still striving to heal. The social fabric of Africa was also fundamentally altered. Indigenous cultures, languages, traditions, all were forced to conform to European norms. The voices of Africa were suppressed, drowned out by the loud proclamation of a European civilizing mission. This cultural assimilation, this erasure of African identity, is a wound that still bleeds. But Africa is not a passive player in this narrative. From the ashes of colonization rose resistance movements, voices of protest against the loss of their land, their resources, their very identity. This fight for decolonization, for self-determination, continues to this day, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the African people. The borders drawn in Berlin continue to shape Africa, a testament to the long shadow of the past. Yet the legacy of the Berlin Conference is not just about division and exploitation. It's also about resilience, resistance, and the ongoing struggle for a more inclusive and equitable world. So what can we learn from this slice of history? What lessons does the Berlin Conference hold for us today? A pivotal event in the tale of Africa's past, it serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of disregarding the voices and rights of the people. It underscores the importance of self-determination, the right of all peoples to govern their own destiny. In the grand scheme of things, it's a poignant lesson in the power dynamics that have shaped our world. The conference was a clear demonstration of might over right, a power play that disregarded the intrinsic value of Africa's diverse cultures and societies. It's a reminder that power should never be wielded irresponsibly, nor should decisions be made in the absence of those who will bear the brunt of their consequences. Moreover, the Berlin Conference serves as a grim reminder of the destructive potential of unchecked greed. The scramble for Africa was not about bringing civilization or Christianity to the continent, but about exploiting its rich resources for the benefit of the colonizers. This exploitation led to the erosion of Africa's indigenous cultures and the depletion of its resources, a reminder that resource extraction should always be sustainable and respectful towards the people and cultures associated with it. Looking at the world today, the echoes of the Berlin Conference still reverberate. Its legacy is etched into the political, economic and social fabric of Africa. The artificial borders drawn by the European powers still exist, often serving as the root cause of conflict and tension. Yet, amidst these echoes of the past, we also find a call to action, a call to acknowledge the impacts of colonialism, to learn from the mistakes of our predecessors, and to strive for a world that values the voices, rights and cultures of all its inhabitants. It's not just about reflecting on the past, but about using that reflection to inform our actions today, to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, but instead build a future that is inclusive, equitable, and respectful of all cultures and peoples. As we look back at the Berlin Conference, let us strive to understand its impacts and work towards a more inclusive and equitable future, because always remember, the past was the worst.